Phil, to a certain degree, if Muslims were to pick up weapons because they are being shown, the American bombings in one region of the world, it's an emotional issue. And also because of several, policies that countries have followed, civilians have lost a lot of lives, and let's
Yeah.
admit it.
Yeah.
So, to a certain degree, you can only understand why somebody might pick up a weapon, although it's not at all justified, obviously. But what surprises me even more, and you've written extensively on this, is how Western people who are not necessarily Muslims have also joined the jihadis. How does this happen?
Well, you've raised a very good point. A drone strike that takes out a family that has nothing to do with Lashkar-e-Toiba or Hizb ut-Tahrir al-Shams or Al-Qaeda or ISIS creates a whole system of martyrdom.
Right.
And people want revenge. That's a basic human, I don't know, I wouldn't call it a need, but it's a basic human reaction. If you hurt my family, I want to hurt your family in return. And I think that this is what the jihadis have very successfully done. I will give them credit. Their propaganda and their online media, their platforms have been extremely successful in painting this picture. Drones and airstrikes and US special forces and armies have come to occupy Muslim lands. They're killing Muslims. They're raping Afghan women or Muslim women. And what are you going to do about it? And they almost like, they make you feel personally responsible for a reaction. How can you sit there in Canada or in India while your sisters and brothers are suffering in Iraq or Afghanistan or Somalia or Nigeria, whatever? And as a consequence, people that have nothing to do with the area, and I saw it for well over a decade, a Canadian from a small town somewhere in Western Canada, next thing you know, he's fighting in Somalia. And I think, well, what are you doing in Somalia? You're not even Somali. But because they're convinced that Somali Muslims are suffering, that the West is at fault, and they want to do their part to protect them. Part of it too is that they're sold this notion that if you're a martyr, then you get rewards. There's the so-called paradise that awaits you if you die a martyr. Right. It's a very strong message, and I understand why it works. And you know what? It's no different than the types of messages that we used here in Canada during the First and Second World Wars to recruit Canadians to go fight in Europe. Nazi German Nazis are killing innocent people in France. You have to go and help your French citizens. That's exactly, the propaganda was very similar actually for the First World War. And I read a book on that. It's fascinating. It's almost like a jihad in the First World War. And so when you have this emotional messaging and you feel a personal link, a personal relationship with people halfway around the world, that's why you get on a plane and that's why you go join these terrorist groups.
Very interesting. Once these individuals do return to the country of origin, let me connect this with to the previous answer that you gave, because we genuinely do not know how much sincerely they've been de-radicalized, right? It's impossible for us to actually figure that out.
Yeah.
So in terms of their return, supposing they do return and supposing they do go through certain protocols that entail de-radicalization methods, there are still obvious security threats to the state. So how does intelligence actually filter this out, and how do you deal with this?
Great question. It requires resources. So if you were to return, and I've met people who have come back from fighting with terrorist groups abroad, and it frightens me how committed I think that they still are. Well, your security services have to investigate them. They have to put them under surveillance to see where do they go, with whom do they meet, what is their online presence. And all of that takes time and money. You have to actually have the people in place to follow people around physically. You have to have the people in place to monitor their telephone calls. If you get an intercept warrant from a court, you have to have the people that can recruit human sources to try to find out what they're really thinking. And you only have limited resources. And you've got other investigations simultaneously. So it's a huge challenge for security intelligence and law enforcement to simply have enough people to do all the cases at the same time. And as a consequence, you make decisions. You say, okay, Sharon he's okay. I'm not worried about him, but that Phil guy, wow, he's really still very much involved in the movement. I'm going to focus on him. What if your decision is wrong? And what if we stop looking at you because we've assessed that you've been de-radicalized or disengaged, whatever, and a month from now or 2 months from now, you do something. I'll give you a very concrete case very shortly. Our biggest counterterrorism investigation was called the Toronto 18 back in 2005, 2006. 18 people eventually got arrested. One was convicted. He did his jail time. He got out of jail. He told everybody, you know what? I've changed. I'm a different man right now. You don't have to worry about me. Well, a year after getting out of jail, he was enrolled in a college program. He disappeared suddenly. Turns out he stole his cousin's passport. He altered his physical appearance to match the photo. He flew to Somalia and he died fighting for Al-Shabaab. He had convinced everybody that he no longer believed in this kind of movement, and here he was. He ended up dying with Al-Shabaab. So that to me is the lesson to be learned. You never know if somebody is going to re-engage, and that requires resources.
Do you think this is also possible because many of these recruits who have returned home also know that they won't be accepted by the common society?
Yeah. That's a really good point. I think there's a sense of rejection. There's a sense of, well, you don't represent us anymore. In fact, you give us a bad name. So we're going to sort of push you away, not deal with you. And as a consequence, if if your family rejects you or your friends or your community, well, who do you have left? Well, the same people you fought with in Somalia, Nigeria, Afghanistan, or Iraq. Those are your friends. Those are your family now. And as a consequence, you kind of go back to them. So, but how do you accept somebody who fought for Al-Qaeda? How do you accept somebody who fought for ISIS and kept a Yazidi sex slave? I mean, that's pretty. I mean, I'm a father and a grandfather, and I think if one of my kids joined Al-Qaeda, well, first of all, it'd be very embarrassing for that CSIS guy to have his son join Al-Qaeda. But I mean, how would I feel personally about that? That wouldn't be an easy thing to do, I think.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.